gentlemen, I'm quitting alcohol. So I'm doing another gig tonight. Same gig as I did the other week. I think they've increased capacity to 20 people at comedy clubs now, or little shitty rooms like this. 20 people would be fucking amazing. That's pretty much an actual crowd. There's no way this place will get 20 though, 100%. They can keep raising the capacity as much as they want for this little room, and there's no fucking way they're going to pull a crowd bigger than 12. In all the years this room has been around, and it's changed hands like maybe 10 or 12 times in the last 6 or 7 years. In the whole time this room has existed, I reckon it's been packed out maybe twice. I don't know why either. It's an underground, dungeony, cool little fucking spot to do comedy. It's just in the wrong area. It's in an area where fucking hipsters hang out. Hipsters and fucking artists, and there's nothing artists look down on more than comedy. It doesn't even need to look like art. They can be sculpting shit out of clay, and artists will still be like, what do you do? I'm a comedian. Ugh, gross. And no one cares less about comedians than Australia does as a whole. The only way you fucking sell tickets in Australia is you get on radio, which is a fucking it's a dinosaur. Who the fuck listens to radio? It's embarrassing. It's so fucking embarrassing. Everyone on it's embarrassing. The music's embarrassing. The same 100 songs are just played every fucking day. The no repeat work day that we repeat 365 days a year. Now we have Claire from Endeavour Hills. How are you, Claire? Good to hear. You got through, did you? Okay, Claire, for your chance to win $50,000, do you know what the secret sound is? Before you answer, we'll just play it again for you. So, Claire, do you know what the secret sound is? Claire, that is a very good guess. Let's just go check with our judges to see if you have won the $50,000. So, Claire from Endeavour Hills has said the secret sound is one of our listeners hanging themselves in the garage. Is she right? Well done, Claire, you are the winner. It's just fucking too much. It's embarrassing. You're still doing the secret sound after 30 fucking years, probably 40 fucking years. You haven't come up with anything better than the secret sound. You fucking irrelevant, obsolete fucking losers. Sellout fucking losers. Me and my wife listen to the radio every now and then when we're in the car because it's neutral. It's something we can both hate. Otherwise, I'll be playing like a 3.5-hour lecture on the birth of consciousness, or she will be playing like fucking Indian tunes from the 1960s. And there's only so much each of us can take of that shit. But we were listening to the radio the other day and she made a good fucking point. The hosts were going through some inane fucking banter. Unlistenable shit. And she's like, I wouldn't even want to listen to this if they were on the table next to me at a restaurant. I would stop listening. I wouldn't even fucking eavesdrop on this conversation. And this is radio. So that's the one way you can sell tickets as a comedian in Australia. Get on radio. The other way is to get on TV, which is exactly the same as radio, except they film it. And it's all the same fucking people too. It's all the same fucking people. And it's not like there's no good comedians out there either. In Australia, there's some fucking really good comedians in Australia that you will just never fucking hear of. You're going to have to search them out yourself, Australia, because if the borders stay shut for much longer, that's all you're going to be getting. And if you're going to continue to only buy tickets to the shows that the Australian radio and TV industry dish out to you, that's all you're going to get. Some tepid, watered down, fucking horse shit. I'm talking about Australia, but I'm pretty sure that applies across the board. Except for the US, because they have the fucking podcasting industry. The only people selling tickets in the US are the badass podcast hosts. The fucking comedians, the industry rejected, are the only ones selling tickets. Anyway, I'm looking forward to the gig tonight. I really am looking forward to it. I don't know if I'm looking forward to it as much as you guys are looking forward to Boyle Breaks History. We've got another installment of Boyle Breaks History, and this week we are tackling another subject that is very close to my heart. The Bay of Pigs invasion. I'm not too sure how many of you have even heard of the Bay of Pigs. It is something you pick up in the common vernacular, but I'm not too sure how many people even know what the fuck it is. I certainly didn't. So for those of you who don't know what the Bay of Pigs is, for starters, it had nothing to do with police. The police were not involved in the Bay of Pigs at all. It's just a coincidence that the bay was called Bay of Pigs and police officers are, well, you know. That was a joke, Victoria Police. Clear my record. So the Bay of Pigs was a failed invasion of Cuba set up by the CIA. So this is how it went down. Fidel Castro had just taken over Cuba. And let me tell you, Fidel Castro was a good-looking dude when he was young. Che Guevara, just good-looking cats. No wonder the revolution succeeded. So I'll just give you a little bit of a background on that. I should actually do a full episode on the Cuban Revolution because it's pretty fucking interesting. Cuba is interesting just in itself, actually. There's a lot of fucking shit that went down in that little fucking island. You got the Bay of Pigs, you got the Revolution, you got the Spanish-America Wars, you've got Guantanamo Bay in there somewhere, you got the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's fucking crazy for a little island that just does the rumba. So before Fidel Castro took over, there was a guy named Batista who was running the show, who coincidentally was also a good-looking fucking dude. Cubans are fucking hot. I was in Cuba for New Year's last year, and it was fucking great. I was there for a week, one of the best places I've ever been to in my life. There was not 1 minute I was in Cuba that I wasn't fucking drunk. It was paradise. So yeah, Cuba had this dictator, Batista, who was basically in the pockets of all the American interests there. When Batista was dictator, 80% of the fucking land, working land in Cuba was owned by Americans. American businesses, sugar companies, chocolate companies, shit like that. Hershey's Chocolates owned a bunch of fucking Cuba. So when Fidel took over, he's like, fuck you, and took back all this land. And so I guess America were like, fuck, our fat kids are running out of chocolate. What are we going to do? So the president at the time, Dwight Eisenhower, Ike, fucking disgusting how he treated Tina Turner, but he became president anyway, old Ike. So Ike is like, we need to get rid of fucking Fidel. But he didn't want to go full invasion. So he went to the CIA, gave them a bunch of money and said, look, do whatever you need to do. Let's get this Fidel cunt out of here. So the CIA began recruiting exiled Cubans in Miami. Because when Fidel took over, I think a few of them swam over. I think heaps of them swam over. They swam over with plastic bags full of coke, and then they just started shooting up Miami. So the CIA recruited, I think it was like 1,300 exiled Cubans, kind of like Ocean's 13. It's like Ocean's 1300, except no George Clooney, no Brad Pitt. They were basically recruiting people living under bridges. So the CIA is recruiting and training these counter-revolutionaries. And in this time, there was an election, and good old fucking JFK got elected. So one day after JFK was getting blown by Marilyn Monroe and the housekeeper, he looked over and saw the plan for this Bay of Pigs shit. And he's like, what the fuck is going on here? But it was already in motion. So he's like, all right, let's run with it. So the CIA's plan was they were going to land, train and arm these 1,300 exiled Cubans, and then land them at the Bay of Pigs, start fighting, and then set off a popular uprising in Cuba. The problem was Fidel was fucking popular. They liked Fidel at the time because Fidel was taking back the land, and they'd just been worked over by Batista for fucking years. The other problem was Fidel found out about the Bay of Pigs invasion way before they got there. The CIA had planned to attack Fidel's Air Force with planes they painted in the same colors as the Cuban Air Force. But by the time those planes got there, Fidel had already moved all his fighter planes somewhere else, so there was basically no loss. Then they sent in Ocean's 1300 to kick off this revolution, and they landed in the Bay of Pigs. Fidel's army was already there waiting for them. He had like 60,000 troops there versus 1,300 exiled cokeheads. So the whole thing lasted about 2 days. Ocean's 1,300 lost about 100 guys on the first day, and then 1,100 of them were captured by Fidel's army. So it wasn't very fucking successful. Eventually, the US had to pay like $53 million in aid and money and shit to get those 1,100 cokeheads back. So that was the Bay of Pigs, a fucked up CIA plot to overthrow Fidel Castro, and it didn't fucking work. And that is another installment of Boyle Breaks History. And that's it for me tonight. If you're enjoying the podcast, give it a share around with your friends, add me on social media. See you the fuck later.